Morning, everybody. It's Julie Roginsky here with Michelle Kinney, and we are so thrilled to have Ellie Leonard join us today. Hello. Somebody I have admired for so long.
Oh, thank you.
Substack is phenomenal. The Panic Writer over on Substack for people who are watching us on YouTube and not on Substack. You have been doing ridiculous, crazy yeoman's work going for a lot of weeks. Epstein files and all of these releases, all of which I think is, 10% of what's apparently
Yeah, I know. Yeah, who knows?
Crazy.
It's a mythical number that we'll probably never get to know. Who knows?
Yeah, and we want to talk to you about Epstein in a minute, but I also want to just kick it off. And Michelle pointed this out. Michelle and I have been completely trashing the Met Gala, which happened yesterday here in New York, across the park from where Michelle and I are at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And Michelle, go ahead, because you pointed this out.
Well, no, I saw in your Substack this morning asking the question, did anyone speak out? I can assume I know what you mean by, the in terms of subject matter. There's so many things that the people at the Met Gala could have spoken up about, but to you, what's the topic that you wish people had talked about when the microphone was shoved in their faces?
I mean, it feels like such an obvious moment to speak up for humanity when you have an event where the tickets cost $100,000 and it's like basically sponsored by Jeff Bezos, that you either boycott it loudly or you attend loudly. And so what I was hoping for there would be a lot more, like, even if it's just in the things that they wear, that they would be more statement pieces. You saw a lot of like AI dresses online last night of what people could have been wearing, but it just felt like heinously tone deaf at this moment in time. And I've seen actors online saying like, I didn't go, for a reason, but it just, you saw people there that once upon a time were pretty political and did speak out, and then they're just showing it. Like there was, I forget who it was, but somebody showed up with like a dollar bill across their mouth, and it was like, but you paid $100,000 to go to this party. It just felt like a moment when people could have gotten really loud about a lot of things, and instead kind of just it was such a let them eat cake. I know that's cliche, but it was just a moment that it's such beautiful dresses, but just such a hard eye roll, I think, from the American people for just ignoring every other thing that's going on in the world.
It's kind of interesting because you have Anna Wintour, who has kind of approached mythical status here, and especially with The Devil Wears Prada 2 coming out, and she's really leading into this movie in the way that she did with the first one 20 years ago. She's on cover of Vogue with Meryl Streep. Like, she is full on leaning into her mythology. She's no longer the head of Vogue. She's passed that on, and she's now the creative director at Condé Nast. Like, this woman has nothing left to fear. And yet I feel like she just took this Met Gala and sold it. And this is a woman, by the way, who has been a vocal Democrat for decades. I remember, when Clinton was around, Obama was around, she was potentially discussed as an ambassador to England under Obama. She did fundraisers for him. Like, she is not hiding her political affiliation, and yet I feel like she, like so many of these other people, just sold out to she did not need Jeff Bezos to underwrite this thing for $100 million, whatever, 10 million.
And he didn't do the carpet, by the way. Lauren Sanchez did, but he didn't. And a lot of the tech people didn't do the carpet, but they went inside, Mark Zuckerberg being another one. I'm sure because they didn't, because it's a bad look. It's a bad look. I mean, it is dystopian. It is dystopian. I mean, and when you see the camera footage from, the steps or whatever, and there was a shot of Lauren Sanchez sort of standing there, and you could see all the people across the street with their phones up, just like regular people in like jean shorts or whatever. And I'm like,
I mean, the idea that money has become its own political party. So when we saw the inauguration and all of a sudden all these ardent Democrat CEOs were lining the stage, and we keep going like, well, why does that person keep supporting something that supports Trump or supporting something that supports billionaires? It's because for them, it's not the politics of like social justice and humanity anymore. It benefits them, and they cannot see past that dollar amount. Like it breaks your brain. Like you just can't get out of it after a certain point.
Yeah.
You know, to your point, I think you've been doing tremendous work on Michael Wolff, who, who, speaking of selling out and speaking of, well, I don't know that he ever sold in. I think he just, I think that's who he is. But like, you know, you've been exposing this grossness that he's kind of emblematic of, but not just him. I think a lot of other people are just emblematic of, which is like moths to a flame of wanting to be in the room where it happens. And they perceived, I guess, Jeffrey Epstein as being not just a rich guy, but a guy who was a connector and being in the room where things happen. Is that like, why?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, tell us about Michael Wolff, and then tell us what you think his motivation is for why he went from being what he pretends to be, which is kind of this observer of the rich and powerful, to what I said to Michelle when we were speaking earlier about this, which is I do PR, you know, I do crisis comms for corporations and politicians. I've never seen better crisis comms in my life than Michael Wolff was doing.
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay. So Michael Wolff, you know, he's an author. We know him for writing about Trump. I mean, he has no problem touting his history and the things that he's done. He's been very involved. Most recently, his only platform right now is the Daily Beast. But, you know, he was very heavily invested in New York Magazine. He contributed to a lot of major publications. A lot of people knew who he was. And I think part of this journey for me was researching how other people in journalism felt about Michael Wolff, because I knew I'm putting myself out there. Am I throwing myself under the bus in the process? You know, is he going to get a whole lot of support and response? And ultimately what I found is there's not a lot of love lost for Michael Wolff. He is a very polarizing character. He tends to get what he wants at you know, the steamrolling of other people. And so when he was introduced to Epstein sometime in the early 2000s, so we know that he flew on Epstein's plane to go to a TED Talk in maybe 2001, 2002, he became fast friends. He tried to get Epstein and Harvey Weinstein and Donny Deutsch and Nelson Peltz, he tried to get them to buy New York Magazine, and they were ultimately outbid by Bruce Wasserstein. But like he became a pretty heavy emotionally invested person in Epstein, because despite, you know, at some point, despite Epstein's criminal history, he saw the forest for all the trees and wanted the big stuff that came along with Epstein. And he was willing to set aside the things he knew about him, the things he recognized flying on that plane, that first trip. He recognized that there were young girls everywhere. He was willing to put all that aside because Epstein could be the ultimate source on Donald Trump for everything that he couldn't actually get out of White House interviews himself. And so he became the PR guy for Epstein, and eventually Epstein became a paying client to Michael Wolff, which clearly oversteps the bounds of journalism. But he hung around for nearly 20 years, worked with PR teams, crushed stories that would have done what Julie K. Brown did years earlier. He stood in the way of the protections of survivors, not only stood in the way by catching and killing stories, but by publicly discrediting and writing public statements for Epstein. And so none of this has really been public or well known about Michael Wolff, because, you know, a few months ago, he came back to Substack. He sort of had a hero's welcome. People were really excited. He has this mythical 100 hours of interviews with Epstein, and he has portrayed himself as this avid, you know, advocate for survivors, when in fact we have, you know, at least 10 years of emails showing that he actively blocked the stories of survivors and discredited them publicly. So I have made it my mission, because I don't like bad people. I've made it my mission to out the things that he said, because he's continuing to grift off the stories of children who were abused, and everybody in the way and has a platform to do so. And I just want people to know what he did, and that he has never admitted to the things that he did, and that he's continuing to make money. And I think the thing that set me off was when Melania threatened to sue him for saying that she had sex on Epstein's plane. He raised nearly $1 million off like Substackers and middle class, donations. And I remember thinking like, wait, I get it. I get that maybe he wants to like fight the suit that never happened. But why does he need that? He made $13 million on Fire and Fury with Epstein's help. Like, why does he need $1 million from the American public? And that was kind of like a little red flag for me to just start looking into some of these stories. And so when in January, when they dropped that massive amount of files, I just, we have the DOJ search page now, and I just clicked from Michael Wolff, and I was like, let's just see. And it had 1,830 hits, and it was a trove of conversations that have never been made public. It was the introduction of Steve Bannon. It was sharing information, White House operations information with the Saudis. It was a lot of stuff. And some of it, I wonder how legal it was. And so I thought, I'm just going to write this up. I'm going to analyze this, and then I'm going to make it as public as I possibly can.
Well, let me ask you about the motivation there, because is it financial? Is it wanting to be in the room where things happen? Is it that Epstein was a source for him on Trump, which was the ultimate goal? Although this predates Trump, as you point out, by decades.
Right.
Like, what do you make of this? Is it all the above?
Well, I think the currency for these men, and a lot of them you'll see, is the Rolodex, right? They want to be able to open their phones and show who they know. That is very, very important. And it started out as that. It started out as being in proximity to someone who was in proximity to everybody else, and that was Epstein. And again, we have lots of questions about why that was with Epstein. Why did he know everybody? Why was he so connected? But Michael Wolff really, really wanted that. And historically, you see that, with him, with going to these billionaire parties and like schmoozing up as a journalist with a lot of very wealthy people. But ultimately, he, as Donald Trump was president and campaigning, and he began to write about Donald Trump, and he was in and out of the White House many, many, many times. He has, I think, 200 hours of interviews with different people in the White House. He realized that Epstein was the ultimate source on Donald Trump for his history. And then at some point, meeting Steve Bannon, he realized that Steve Bannon was the ultimate source on Donald Trump for the things more recent. And so between those two men, he not only wanted to ride what he thought was going to be Epstein's like return to power and glory, and he wanted to kind of ride that to the top, he also wanted Epstein as his ultimate source. And so he cleared anything that got in his way, he cleared out of the way. And that was like articles for New York Magazine he crushed. He tried to get ahead of books that were being published by getting the manuscripts ahead of time and seeing if they could like counter narrative them or write another book. And he did anything to stop what could have stopped Epstein in order for him to give drafts of his book to Epstein to edit. And then ultimately he made $13 million. So, and then he released Siege as well with Epstein's help. So he saw Epstein as a source of becoming this, top of the line New York Times bestseller, but he also really thought that Epstein was going to be the guy to know, and that's currency in their neighborhood. That is what they wanted.
And he's sitting on how many hours? 100 hours?
100. According to him, 100 hours, yes.
And so,
and
can Congress subpoena that, or is this a question of like this is journalistic proprietary information, right?
Yes.
That's what he's claiming.
That is so Congress has his emails. They were given his emails just because that is something to know. But that is the question, is there an ethical issue of subpoenaing a journalist, right? That's a huge issue. But then you have to question, like, was he doing this in the name of journalism for 20 years and the PR and being paid? Epstein being a paying client, does that then erase that idea of him being a journalist? But ultimately, those interviews do need to be investigated, because if we're talking about the Epstein files and we're talking about Trump's culpability in the Epstein files, Donald Trump is the number one thing that Epstein was willing to talk about. They had a very heated rivalry. They hated each other at some point. And so in his emails, he would do info dumps about all the illegal things that Donald Trump had done. And so he was very willing to talk about him. So if you have 100 hours of interviews with this guy, you are going to have a massive trove of information on Donald Trump, and it's not under the thumb of the DOJ. It's privately owned. So it's accessible. It's not redacted. Like, it's a lot of information. And I feel like it's something that, again, why I wrote this piece, I feel like it's something that the Congress doesn't even know. Like, Congress isn't paying attention to Michael Wolff's Substack. They don't know he has 100 hours of interviews. And I'm screaming it so that they figure it out, because this could be more information than they have. He's like the number one source on Epstein.
You said that Congress doesn't know about this. It seems as though the mainstream media also doesn't know about this, or if they do, they don't want to cover it. Right. And we're living in a time now where independent media is the present, and it's certainly the future. And obviously what you're doing, what Julie's doing with her Substack as well, is incredible, you know, unearthing all these stories and connecting the dots for people in ways that people on MSNBC or New York Times are just not doing.
Right.
And so part of me is like, well, if they were doing it, you know, how can we trust that they'd be doing it well enough, right? To really, really tell the story. But I think even more than that, like, why are they not even touching it? Is it because they're like, they have all the resources, they have all the researchers, they have all of the lawyers to lawyer everything. You're one person putting all of this together.
I think it's a little bit of cronyism. Like, you know, this is a person who's been in media for a very long time. I approached a couple of platforms with the article who were interested in it, but they were hesitant because they knew that people who worked for them were still connected to Michael Wolff. And so that's touchy, right? But all I ask, and I've been very thorough with where I've sent this information. I sent it to all the publishers that he was reaching out to for James Patterson's book prior to publication. I've sent it to the people who recently have published his articles at New York Magazine. I've sent it to, you know, major journalists who are now on Substack. And most people are pretty supportive of this story. But ultimately, whether you're his friend or not, I just want you to read the emails and make a decision for yourself, because it's very hard to look away once you know what was being said behind closed doors, because these two men had no idea this would ever be read, it would ever be investigated. And it's pretty damning stuff, you know, for where we are today.
I feel like it's the same thing that happened in the first iteration of Epstein, where nobody touched it until Julie K. Brown finally did it decades later, right? And this is out there in the open. He has still got his Daily Beast podcast with Joanna Coles. I gotta say, I know Joanna Coles somewhat. The Daily Beast, I think, does good work. I am shocked that he continues to have a platform there to talk about the stuff. And I think you're right. It's because it's good gossip and it's good dirt, and it's like eavesdropping on the royal family in some ways, right? Like the reason like people read gossip about, you know, the British royal family is the same reason they listen to him. He's quippy. He's got a good way about him. But the reality is he is sitting, as you point out, on 100 hours of testimony about the president of the United States, among other people, I'm sure, including Jeffrey Epstein. And he, I don't know, is he saving it for a book? Like, if he's saving it for a book, which, you know, that's a whole separate story of how even New York Times reporters save the good stuff for the book. But if you're saving it for the book, tell us and write the book and make another $20 million on it. But the reality is, I don't think that that's what's happening. Do you have any indication that we're going to release this?
I think that was the intent early on. Originally, if you read his emails, he was planning a documentary and a book about Epstein. And the book about Epstein would not have been the book that we would read now. It would have been more of a glowing review of greatness and this, you know, perpetual bachelor living in New York City, where they touch on the fact that he's a ladies' man, but they don't really go farther than that. He had plans for that. And so I believe that on his hard drive with these interviews, he has other things. He has manuscripts, he has potential footage. But I think, you know, his sort of lame duck response that he gave everybody who interviewed him when he first came to Substack was that nobody wanted the interviews. And then he wouldn't say anything after that. And everybody's like screaming, like, I will take the interviews. I will transcribe them for you. I will make them public for you, drop them on a Google Drive. I think, because if it's about money, if he wants to make money on them, put them behind a paywall and then start posting. Like, there's lots of ways that he can financially benefit from them if that's what he wants. But I think now that these emails have come out, I think that he realizes his position in his conversations with Epstein, and that those emails or those interviews may not put Michael Wolff in the best light. And if he wanted to release them, he'd have to heavily edit them. I don't think, my guess is he's never gone back and listened to the entire thing. That's a lot of interviews. But my guess is he's probably worried about what those interviews say now. And if he releases all that information on Donald Trump, that door effectively closes for him to ever write about Donald Trump again, because he will no longer have the connections that he had. He was pretty, he did a little bit of backstabbing. So he would have people who were his informants, and then he would turn around, and Bannon is one of them, say that he's spectrum-y and he's unreliable and he never shows up on time. Like, just this dance of like, I need information from you, but then I'm going to talk down you to other people. And I'm sure all that is in there, and he doesn't want that information out. So I would say, even if he does plan to write a book, which, right now he claims he's writing chapters on his Substack, pulling from these interviews, I would say that the House oversight still needs to see those interviews in full, especially, when we think of some of like the sharing of information with the Saudis. There are things in there that could be more detrimental to like U.S. security that we needed to pay attention to.
And not just him, but Steve Bannon, right? Like, Steve Bannon is sitting on hours.
17 hours or something, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They were both making documentaries, but didn't tell each other that they were making documentaries.
Why are all these people exactly the same?
Yeah.
Because they're all grifting in their own way. It's unbelievable. But but what I don't understand, is you have Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, who I think have done good work on this. I'm going to put aside the Republican women who have decided that they are now big Me Too champions. They got a very glossy article yesterday in the New York Times, despite the fact that they have excused Trump's own behavior. So I'm going to put aside the fact that the New York Times, by the way, and I've complained about this ad nauseum, has dedicated itself and its editorial pages to discounting and trying to pretend the Me Too movement is over. So the New York Times is not your friend when it comes to any support of survivors, including this glowing piece that they did on Paulina Luna and Nancy Mace. And
well, they even did like a profile on Harvey Weinstein, and it was, it was about where he is now. And it's this black and white sort of like, I'm like, are we really doing this? We're going to platform this guy and give him, a moment to speak out when no one else can,
Right. For people here in the chat who are saying Thomas Massie has disappeared in the last month, he's got a huge primary coming up this month. Yeah. So if he gets through this primary, which hopefully he will, I believe that he will be back to do this. But the reality is, you've got Ro Khanna, who has never seen a iPhone that he doesn't want to see. You've got Massie, who I think has done good work on this issue.
Yeah.
Where are they? Like, are they aware of what you're writing? Has anybody gotten this to them?
Yes. Ro Khanna, yes. Jamie Raskin, yes. We do have sort of like a little filtration system where we're picking and choosing sort of these bigger issues and putting them in front of people. I just find it interesting, and I get that people are busy, working in Congress, but I find it really interesting. I'm not a journalist by trade. And even if I was, I find it very interesting that these people who are running our country are relying on bloggers to investigate this case, right?
Yes.
And we're doing it. We're happy to do it, but it just feels like the fact that we're crowdsourcing, when we have an FBI and a DOJ, but we're crowdsourcing information to solve like the crimes of the president of the United States, feels a little strange to me. And when you talk about like the New York Times, in some of these major publications, like the Washington Post that is now run by Jeff Bezos. Like, I subcontracted for the New York Times for, I think, 9 years, so I was a fly on the wall for all the Weinstein stuff. I was there for a lot of really major cases that are reflections of this case. This is not my first rodeo. They are so enmeshed in this case in ways that they have not written about. The New York Times, when Jeffrey Epstein left the Dalton School and was hired by Bear Stearns, Punch Sulzberger, they all have weird nicknames, tried to hire Jeffrey Epstein to work at the New York Times. Why? I have no idea. Like, why all these people thought he was the golden child, I have no idea. But then this year, something that I have done every year for like 8 years is I have a small business where I do transcription for journalists and films and things like that. Is I work the Deal Book Conference, where they bring in these huge speakers from every industry. I was in the room when Elon Musk lost his mind a couple of years ago. Like, I've gotten to see some really cool things. But this year, one of the people they brought in was Ehud Barak to speak, and he wasn't going to speak in front of an audience. Yeah, he wasn't going to speak in front of an audience, and he was going to speak with Nicholas Kristof, which I really like Nick Kristof because he really championed Dylan Farrow's story with Woody Allen. Like, I think he's a good person, but I questioned that decision that he would speak to Ehud Barak, because I know, having spoken with survivors and having read Virginia Giuffre's book, I know that Ehud Barak is the well-known prime minister from her book who was so violent, right? I know that that's who they're talking about. And the New York Times knows it if I know it. Like, they're not unaware of that. And so I reached out to them, and I talked to Andrew Ross Sorkin. I've spoken to him many times, and I said, I'm very concerned with this decision. And I would assume that there's a lot of people concerned with this decision, that you're giving a platform to a man who, even if that weren't true, even if that we didn't know if he was that person from her book, clearly was a very close confidant of Jeffrey Epstein, who spent a lot of time with him. Why are you giving specifically this person a platform? And it was the shortest email I've ever gotten. Response was like, I hear you, thank you for blah, blah, blah. And like, Andrew Ross Sorkin is not a short response person, but
and by the way, as far as I remember, Kristof never asked Barak about any of this.
I think he did one, but it was so short.
But it was like a tiny,
yeah. It is weird because it was not in front of an audience, and most of the interview was not ever made public. So I was like, what was the interview for? Like, what is this for? They only posted a couple of minutes of it online, but it was and after I contacted them, I've never been contacted by the New York Times again. So I don't expect to be subcontracting for them, but that's fine. But those connections are there, and they are there at other publications as well. New York Magazine probably played some kind of a role. I think they were, I think the people working there were less aware of the things that Michael Wolff was doing for Epstein, using New York Magazine. But the New York Times was well aware, and there are lots of emails about something that Jeffrey Epstein knows about the Sulzbergers, and if it ever came out, then that would, be front page news or whatever.
Listen, I say this as a huge fan of the New York Times, so it breaks my heart to say this.
Right.
But for a very long time, because of what I do, I don't even know if you know this, but in my spare time, which I don't have much of, I have a third full-time job, which is that I run, I co-founded a Me Too organization called Lift Our Voices. Okay. And my co-founder and I, Gretchen Carlson, have been trying to get an op-ed into the New York Times to refute their weekly, and I mean weekly, sometimes not semi-weekly, op-eds that the Me Too movement is over, that it harmed women, that it was like, that basically set people back. And it's Michelle has heard me complain about this nonstop. This has been they have written, and I'm not joking, they have written more about this than the Iran war recently.
Oh yeah.
And it's to the point where, and listen, I come from a family that knows how the New York Times editorial board works. And so it goes, the way the New York Times editorial board works is, yes, the editorial page editor is in charge of submissions and so on, but the columnists themselves only answer to A.G. Sulzberger. He hires them, and that's all there is a complete autonomy as to what they can do.
Yes.
For the life of me, I don't understand why Christoph or Michelle Goldberg or any one of these columnists does not want to refute this ridiculous notion that the Me Too movement is over, because as somebody who's knee deep in this stuff, I can tell you not only is it not over, it has made tremendous strides, but nobody knows that because the Times is not writing about it in the same way. So my question is there a Sulzberger? Like, I'm not a paranoid person when it comes to this stuff. I'm not a conspiracy-minded person, but if you're telling me, and I think I've read this elsewhere, that the Sulzbergers were somehow that pinch Arthur Sulzberger, he's being called Pinch, so I will give him the respect of saying Arthur Sulzberger or his dad, Punch Sulzberger, were somehow involved. Like, let's have it out. I mean, look, it is a completely bizarre notion to me that what you have written is not something that the New York Times, they can credit you, they could not credit you, but if this were on the front page of the New York Times, Michael Wolff's shit would be in front of Congress tomorrow, or at least there'd be able to get it.
And I've sent it, I sent it to the people that I know can make that happen, that I've worked with for years and years and years. I don't think it will be there. The only thing that they have, I've submitted many things to the New York Times. The only thing that they've ever considered publishing was something that was very vanilla, that was so non-controversial, that didn't poke any bears. Like, if you actually write about something that is controversial and people pay attention to, they don't want to do it because it's divisive or it pokes the administration. And I have heard this so many times. I have 2 books that are unpublished, and when I had an agent for a little while, those were the responses I got from major publishers was, we are fatigued with talking about Me Too. That
is me too. I have a book. Exactly.
We are tired of it. We need to talk about other things now. And I said, that's great if it was done. It was great if women had stopped being like 1 in 3 were molested as children, but it's not done. And so you need to keep talking about it because clearly we haven't fixed it. And so, but this is, this is major agents like William Morris. This is major publishers like Simon & Schuster. They are all saying this. And so it then becomes this, like, when we were marching in 2017 and we were making these big strides, were they just coddling us, and going, oh, cute march, whatever, but we really are still in charge of this whole movement and it's going to go away. And it's frustrating because it feels like it's the idea and like, to the New York Times' credit, I think they have fantastic journalists who work for them and work very hard, are not paid enough, and do the good work, but they cannot get past a wall of their own administration to actually, publish the truth and talk about some of these things.
So it's interesting that you say that. Sorry, Michelle, because I had the exact same thing. I wrote a memoir. Same exact story, shopped it around to every major publisher with an agent. It was told exactly what you said. The Me Too movement, we're tired of it. We don't want to write about it anymore. It's depressing. Where's the happy ending? And I'm like, the happy ending is that we're still talking about this.
Yeah.
And the answer was no, we need something uplifting. And this is a tough time. And I was like, uplifting.
More teenage vampires. That's all they want.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. This isn't a rom-com. You know what I mean? Like, it's
yes, that's all they want.
Yeah. Sorry, Michelle, I totally cut you off. Go ahead.
No. I mean, here's the thing too, and sometimes I really just do think it's this simple. Maybe I'm oversimplifying, but it's just for hundreds, thousands of years, like, people just hate women. They just don't care about us. They don't think of us as whole people who need to be taken seriously. And this is where I remind people also, I co-founded a women's organization in 2024, which I'm no longer at, the Seneca Project, that, we were focused on women's rights. And we found very quickly how much people don't care about women and how much people are not willing to spend money on, advertising to support women's rights during an election, things like this. When it becomes trendy, I guess, for a hot minute, people seem to care, but for the most part, they don't. And 1993 was the year that all 50 states in this country, spousal rape was made illegal. It was 1979, I think, women could finally get credit cards. It hasn't been that long that women have been able to participate in the day-to-day life of being an American. And I think we have to, like, take that with us every time we have these conversations. We are, as millennial, I'm a elder millennial. I think about my generation as we are the most educated, the most financially independent group of women to ever exist in the history of the world. And this is very threatening to a lot of people, because what do financially independent women do? What do educated women do? They think for themselves, they take care of themselves, and they speak up and try to make change, like Julie is with Lift Our Voices with Gretchen Carlson. And I can't help but just every single day just look into the void of our media and the independent storytellers like you, Ellie, and Julie K. Brown at the Miami Herald. Thank God was awarded a Pulitzer Prize. Was awarded a Pulitzer. She was at the front of this.
It's because of her that we're here. Yeah,
exactly. And when I was at Seneca Project too, I had the honor of speaking with Vicki Ward, and she talked about writing a story about Jeffrey Epstein in 2006, which she started to uncover the information about the Farmer Sisters, and she was told by Graydon Carter at Vanity Fair, no, you're not allowed to say this. Right. And this goes back so far. And
this could have happened years ago. We could have done this years ago.
Exactly. And how many lives would have been saved? I mean,
well, let me tell you this, like, as somebody who used to live in the West Village back in the day, right? Back when this was all happening. I used to hang out at a restaurant, which Graydon Carter owned, which was right across the street or down the street from Harvey Weinstein's townhouse. And this was all the same.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched it, right? When I would get in there, like you sit there and you watch all of these people, all of whom are now kind of notorious, and you understand that this is not a moral decision for them. This is a social decision for them.
Yes. Yes.
Even more than financial.
Yes. Even more than financial, in that people would leave political fundraisers at Harvey Weinstein's house, which he hosted all the time for Democrats, and walk down the street or across the street to Graydon Carter's restaurant, and everybody would hang out. I was there. And the truth of the matter is that I think that people misunderstand this whole New York social scene, which is why you mentioned the Sulzbergers before. Like, I don't know who they hang out with, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was all part. It's all part of, everybody hangs out at Michael's, which is a big media hangout. Michael Wolff is certainly there all the time.
Yeah.
Everybody hangs out at the same, events. Joanna Coles used to do a annual women's event, which I went to at Michael's, and everybody, it's all very incestuous. And the reality is, and I think what I am really sick of is that people are and you had this in New York Times the other day, people are very good at holding people to account when it doesn't affect them. But when it comes to their friends or their own political party or their own social network, all of a sudden I see nothing, I hear nothing, which is why the New York Times has this complete and utter hagiography of these three women in Congress who are holding, their colleagues to account. But when you talk about Trump, Nancy Mace says something like, oh, no, that wasn't criminally adjudicated, so it's not true.
Right.
The E. Jean Carroll case, right? And that's the difficulty, I think, Ellie, in you getting your story out to places like the New York Times. It's all part of the same network, and that's not a conspiracy. It's just it's high school.
It's ultimately why we're not adjudicating this case whatsoever. I don't think that Donald Trump or any one of these men has any problem with the sexual debauchery that happened with these girls. I think they think that it was the times. They think, what is the lowest age of consent in the world? I'm a global traveler. That's kind of the Alan Dershowitz take. Like, they don't even think any of that was a problem. And it's sad because the sexual abuse of children became the currency for the thing that they really wanted to do, which was all this financial dealings that were sort of underhanded, and the social network of all these big men who just wanted women from all over the world and girls from all over the world. And so they're more worried about getting their friends' reputations ruined. That is what's stopping Donald Trump from investigating these files is the ruining of reputation, because that is ultimately the thing that matters to him the most, is his reputation and his friend's reputation. And he wants to be popular. He wants to be connected. Again, this is the thing in these networks, is everybody wants to have the biggest circle possible. So they don't care about any of those girls. They are happy to discredit them and say that they lied. You know, you'll see Michael Wolff saying, like, you know, British tabloids will believe anything about Prince Andrew, and some girl who accused him, like, absolutely discrediting every Jane Doe who pops up. But they don't want to have somebody's name like Bill Gates pop into it, because that might hurt his reputation, and that is all they care about. And so therefore they will not release this information. They will redact every male name out of these files, because they don't want to break a connection they have with a powerful person. And that's all that matters.
Because the victims, you know, the law says that you have to release every name but the victims. What people have to, I think this is just the plainest conclusion you can make, is this Justice Department is defining victims as the people who have been accused of bad behavior, but who have not, their excuses, but these people haven't been convicted of anything. So if you mention Bill Gates, or you mention Donald Trump, or you mention whoever, redact, because they're the victims. That's what Congress
99% of the time, that is who is being redacted in these files.
And if I have to hear one more time about, well, you know, if a false accusation could ruin someone's life and people get canceled, men are uncancelable. Like, it's just not, like, there is no such thing, because we're making a movie about Michael Jackson. Harvey Weinstein's got a write up in the New York Times.
Louis C.K. is touring his comedy again.
Exactly.
Bill O'Reilly is back on television. You guys, as somebody who used to be at Fox, I was not one of the O'Reilly women, but I certainly know many of them.
Yeah.
Bill O'Reilly paid out, or Fox paid out on Bill O'Reilly's behalf, 30 million, 50 million. I forgot.
More, I was like, I just watched Loudest Voice in the Room again. And it was more than that.
I just want to be clear. He was back on Fox after being fired. Within months, Sean Hannity had him back. He's on TV on News Nation every day. I mean, News Nation was calling me to ask me to come on their network, and friends at News Nation, no, not until you stop platforming this guy. And so the truth of the matter is, it is uncancelable. They are uncancelable. There's no, but meanwhile, the women who come forward,
they're gone.
If you speak out against, I mean, let's just say sexual assault. Obviously, this is and this is the worst case, right? You speak up and you are immediately questioned. You have to come with I mean, Eric Swalwell, right? And just in the last couple of months, how quickly discredited. And I in the comment sections on Instagram, by the way, of like Sharon Stone, like people who I would think of as champions for women immediately
couldn't handle it.
Couldn't handle it. Immediately came to the defense of Eric Swalwell. And it happens over and over again. And I don't know how the average person, whether you are a woman or a man, does not see this and feel rage. Like rage. And let's say, you know, on the other side of this, you are experiencing, you know, gender discrimination in the workplace or whatever it is. You speak up, you're immediately emotional. You are, oh, well, she was difficult. Hysterical, disgruntled. I mean, you name it. I mean, it's happened to me. It happens to all of us. And, you know, I think about Michael Wolff. Now, I don't think he was on the same trajectory maybe as Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen was kind of seen as this villain, and then not villain, and then now sort of villain again. I think Michael Wolff has kind of been like I don't know if clownish figure is a right word, but just kind of like an unserious person, at least in my point of view, with the Fire and Fury book and all of that. But now, this is something I talked to Julie about this morning. For a small period of time, I think I was one of those people who watched his little Instagram and his little TikTok, where he sets himself up in his little house and he sits in his little chair. He sits in his chair and he has a little story to tell. And he always tags his house, our Amagansett house, which I have renamed our Scamagansett house.
Yep.
I love that.
Because it's all a scam. And he's in this, beautiful coastal home in East Hampton or wherever he is, telling these stories. Like somehow he's the omniscient, storyteller of all things Epstein and Donald Trump. But like, again, like he is a participant in this structure that hurts.
He made it happen. He paved the way for 10 years of abuse. He paved the way. That's why I call him a co-conspirator. You don't have to abuse children yourself to be a co-conspirator of somebody who's abusing children. You just don't.
Exactly. You can be anybody who's enabling any of it.
He's a type too. Like he's a guy who had an affair while he was at New York Magazine with an intern who was 30 years his junior. She got pregnant. You know what I mean? Like it's a type. It's this idea of like, I can have what I want. These are the relationships that I want. I can leave my wife and my kids for a much younger woman because I live in this social circle of men that do that. And yes to everything you're saying.
Yeah, I mean it's all just very acceptable. And it's acceptable behavior, and women have been conditioned, if you want to play ball, you're going to accept it too, because otherwise you're not going to be invited to the parties. You're not going to be, you can lose your money, you can lose your job, you can lose, but like to Julie's point, right? That social net that you have, especially in places like New York or even DC, that's the last thing you have. It's the last thing that's going to help you, stay afloat. And it's the fact that we are still here and beyond women, children. This shouldn't happen to anybody, but children. Yeah. And that's the other piece of this that we can't ever stop talking about. Right.
I think about Dylan Farrow all the time. Like I worked on the documentary that they did a couple of years ago.
I saw that.
And so I heard, yes. And there was a lot that hit the cutting room floor for legal reasons that they weren't allowed to say. I heard everything. I heard everything that was off the record, very heavy NDA signings for that film. If you talk to people now who are fans of Woody Allen, they will tell you he was exonerated. He, like that he was acquitted, whatever. They will get the narrative that he wanted to give as a powerful person, when in fact you had this child who was 7 years old, who her story never changed. She never changed the details from day one. And then you had, even with this Yale study, which is what people wave all the time, there was a Yale study that showed she was not credible. This was really backed by Woody Allen, this study. And then at the end of the study, they burned all their notes. They destroyed everything, which is absolutely illegal. The judge called them out on it. But they were calling this little girl, they said she had psychosis because she was using childlike language to describe the things that happened to her because she didn't know how to describe them in any other way. She had no frame of reference. She would describe the room, she would describe the abuse, but she'd use childlike language because she was 7, and they called her psychotic for doing that. And then that went in the newspaper. And ultimately, the reason why Woody Allen is not sitting in prison right now, because they had enough evidence from the state police, from the FBI, from everything, is because they thought that it would ruin her life to put her on the stand in front of her father. And so they made a decision as a family to pull her from the case so that she could have as most like the normal life that she could. But if you're a Woody Allen fan, he got ahead of that with all of his money and his power, and he stood on the steps of the courthouse and he said, I've been exonerated. And so people have this narrative that she lied. The 7-year-old child was coached and she lied. And, her brother came forward and said she lied. And there's just so much information that people don't know. But because Woody had the money and the power, he was right. And everybody who was standing for Dylan was wrong. And you see that this is an obsession of Michael Wolff's, is the Woody Allen case, because he's very good friends with Woody Allen too, is he continues to try to discredit and crush Dylan Farrow's story, Ronan's writing as a journalist, which is funny now because he's just such a great journalist. But he wanted to completely discredit this story and get rid of it and bring back Woody Allen and Suni's story as a love story and write about them.
What?
And that was like a big thing that he wanted, and they were trying to do. And so you just get, now if you step back and you have people who don't know the details of this, they go, oh yeah, Woody Allen was cleared, he's fine, whatever, he just can't work for Amazon anymore. And it's like, no, you had a child who was violently abused, who told the truth. The FBI went in her house and said, yes, all this is true. We see all the evidence. She said there was a train table. Woody Allen goes, no, there's no train table. They have blueprints that include the train table where she was abused. Like, everything would have been provable, but they wanted her to be safe. So they pulled her from the case. And so people ultimately look at the men and they go, the men won, the child lost, the mother lost, they're discredited. You know, I've seen this in my own hometown where a child cries abuse. Guess what the mom does? She loses the child to the person who abused the child. Like, this has happened over and over and over again since the beginning of time across multiple cultures and religions. This is the standard. And so people think we're so progressive in 2026, and we haven't changed like one iota. The statistics are getting worse.
The funny thing about Woody Allen is, even if you don't know much about the Ronan Farrow case, Dylan Farrow case. Sorry, Ronan. Even if you don't know whom to believe in that particular case, and you just laid out exactly why you should be Dylan Farrow, but let's assume that you still don't know. Put all of that aside. Look at what came out during this Epstein investigation. He is hanging out with a notorious pedophile long after Jeffrey Epstein was already adjudicated as a pedophile. And you see these discussions happening about how to push back on survivors. Why? If you are Woody Allen, what is your obsession with validating Jeffrey Epstein versus these women? Nobody is going to drag you into this case or analogize your case to Epstein's if you don't find yourself hanging out on East 71st Street with Jeffrey Epstein. But he and Suni were there over and
all the time. They were like furniture.
They are like furniture. And my question is, why? Like, you know, and I don't want to hear like, oh, Woody Allen, he's a genius and he's
please. He's like
his movies are not
his movies are good, but plenty of people.
Yeah, but my point is, like, I don't want to hear
like every time.
But I don't want to hear like, you know, he wouldn't delve into the background of somebody, like, you know, like, okay. Long after we all heard Jeffrey Epstein's name as somebody who was a little sketchy, long after everybody kept saying, oh, Bill Clinton rode on this pedophile's plane, Woody Allen, without knowing 1/1000th of what we now know, which is still 1/100000th of what we don't know, still Woody Allen and Suni are hanging out there. So even if you want to put aside everything that Ellie just said about his own situation, why?
They joke about it. They took nothing seriously. They called it pedophile parties. They laughed about it in their emails. They thought it was hilarious. Woody Allen, you know, like Jeffrey Epstein, Michael Wolff was trying to bring Woody Allen back in and be the savior for these big men. And then everybody will think I'm great, kind of a thing. And Woody Allen was editing his movies at Epstein's house. Like, why? I mean, like, why is that even a thing? He's not a studio. Right. And then you start to get these like text messages between Epstein and Woody Allen's daughter, where he's trying to reach out to her. And you can see she's resistant. She's kind of like, OK, you know, whatever. But he's starting to like interact with her in ways that felt uncomfortable for me reading them. But it's just this very and, you know, I don't know if anything ever happened with Woody Allen's children now. I don't know. There's no record of that. But like, there is a history that went back long before. These are the things that never made the film. Long before Dylan Farrow, that these things were occurring and were a pattern. And so I don't see something just stopping. You know, these people don't just stop doing the things that they do. And so now he's finding solace in other people who've been accused of the same things he's been accused of, or like the same things that he likes, because they'll understand me and I can hang out with them. And that was what you were running into with Woody Allen. He was there all the time. You see these movies of David Blaine like doing magic tricks, and you realize that he's with Woody Allen and he's at Epstein's house filming these
right.
2000s. It's just a weird network.
It's like they find brotherhood in their victimhood or something. It's like, see, we're all victims here, and this is our own brotherhood, our own, you know, club that we belong to. And again, Woody Allen married his daughter. He married his daughter.
I mean,
like
stepdaughter,
stepdaughter, but like, okay, daughter. I mean, and again, where I will say that people just don't give a shit about women and children.
Right.
There are 34 states in this country, I think, as of right now, that still allow child marriage.
Yeah. That was one of their arguments, is the age of consent is younger than 18 in multiple states in the US.
Mm-hmm.
But the kicker is it has to be consent. If it is not consent, if a child is not consenting to something and comes forward later and says, I was 16 in this state where consent is okay at 16, but I wasn't consenting and I didn't give consent, then they are automatically a minor and it's illegal. So that is the
you don't prove. I'm sorry, Ellie, you're a mom. I'm a mom. We're both moms of teenagers. I have a boy, so it's hard for me to say what girls this age are like. But I'll tell you right now, I have a son who's about to turn 14, that an adult can pretty much persuade him, because he's a people pleaser, can pretty much persuade him to do anything. Like, you don't consent at this age. When you are 16, I remember being a 16-year-old girl, you think you know everything, you know nothing. And
10 years of brain development left. Like
exactly.
10 years.
A 30-year-old or 50-year-old showed up and said, do this. They're the adult, and you are told to listen to adults.
Yep.
The truth of the matter is, there's no such thing as consent in the way that we consider consent at our ripe old age. So, it's gross, and I could talk to you, and Michelle I could talk to you probably for the next 15 hours. I have so much more that I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you about the Zorro Ranch.
We'll do it again.
Yeah.
Interlochen.
Oh yeah, at Interlochen. I wanted to talk to you. Yeah. I saw you're a theater person on your Substack as well, which I went to school for musical theater. So I mean, like, I have a lot of friends who were at Interlochen in the 90s.
That is something, having spoken with survivors who are from the arts vein of this, which was a big vein of the Epstein story, is the art schools in New York and Europe were a hotbed for sex trafficking, and that's how they funneled the girls in.
Yep.
And so that's never been investigated.
And I also want to talk to you about Dalton, because somebody needs to, so please come back, because the one question I will leave you with is, how does a non-college graduate start teaching at a school like Dalton, where most of the
$70,000 a year for kindergarten,
or the $70,000 a year, as somebody who has a kid who goes to a competitor at Dalton, most of the upper school teachers have PhDs.
Right.
Yep. Never hire.
Top teachers.
They will never hire a college dropout, because if they did, the parents would literally set the school.
Which sorry, I just wanted to ask really quick on that. Like, and we don't have to go down the rabbit hole, but like, this is where the Bill Barr part of this too, right, is so weird.
Donald Barr.
His father being the headmaster, right? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to ask about
there's that circle where you go into like the Robert Maxwell stuff, which, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and we're supposed to believe that Epstein didn't meet her till 1991, but we have letters in the birthday book that show that they could have met in the early 70s, and like his friends are talking about that. And so then that becomes the like, oh, well, he knows Ace Greenberg from Bear Stearns, he knows Donald Barr, like he knows all these people. And so then you start to get this idea of, we have this period of time where Epstein kind of disappeared off the map and was going back and forth to Europe. Was he being groomed for some kind of a role that we don't know about, that then that led to him being just desirable by everybody? That is probably in the files that we haven't seen yet, but that is a humongous part of this story.
Because we keep hearing all the time from people who have seen the files that if you saw everything, it would blow up everything we've ever known and believed. So it's obviously, it's obviously that a lot more than just pedophilia, because apparently pedophilia is not taken seriously by anyone.
It's global. It's a lot of treasonous global stuff that we're not supposed to know about. Yeah.
And of course, we could talk about Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, who died under very mysterious circumstances after, and this is not a conspiracy theory, but after being an asset of the Israeli foreign, intelligence services. So
buried on the Mount of Olives for some wild reason.
Like there's so much more to talk with you about. Please come back, because
please, I'd love it.
Had another 5 hours and we still probably wouldn't have
honestly.
Ellie, thank you. Is just wonderful here. Welcome to, I know it's been a few years, but welcome to the East Coast. I know it's not Montana, it's not as beautiful, but it's got its charms. So good to see you, and
thank you.
We'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye, guys.
Bye.